Andy, thank you very much, and it is indeed a pleasure to come and share some thoughts with you. We're not here to talk about cattle. We're here to talk about family. And that's what he has asked me to share about because of the generations of my family that have been so unselfish in keeping the ranch in the family and the family in the ranch. That's what I want to talk about tonight. As each of us have land, we have cattle, we have a common thread, and the government has I believe, an unfair taxation system that wants to take too much of that when we pass from one generation to the next. Thankfully, our current administration is working to improve that. But how many of us know families where they've had to sell half the ranch to pay the tax, to pay the death tax, to pay the inheritance tax? And how many of us know families that have become divided when managing an estate or when dividing an estate? I'm going to tell you, our parents are doing this a little bit different. Is this coming across okay? All right. My parents have done it a little bit differently. This is our family. This was about 10 years ago. All of us in Lubbock, Texas there at the Ranching Heritage Center, my mom and dad celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. That was about 10 years ago because they just celebrated their 60th not long ago. And our family at that stage of the game. But I tell you what, to me, keeping the ranch in the family is something that is very important to me, something that I think we need to really work hard at. So let's look into it. Here's a question. How many squares are on this screen? 16. How many squares are on there? 17. Oh, 21. No rectangles. They've got to be square. 22. Derek says 22. 25. Now some of y'all are going, that happy hour must have been really happy. All right, 4 times 4 is what? One big square around the outside makes 17. All right? Now, how about 4 by 4? There's one of those in each corner, and that makes 21. There's one right in the middle. Okay, that makes 22. You were right. All right. Now, how about the one right beside it that is also 4 by 4? And that makes a cross there in the middle if you do all 4 of those. So that gets us to 26. Are there more? Kirk says there's more. How about 3 by 3? That's square, isn't it? There's one of those in each corner. Makes a total of 30 if we just look one-dimensional. Now, when we first looked at it, how many of us saw 16? And what I want to challenge us tonight is to look deeper to find more as we look at generational transfer. Because I want to tell you, from dust we came and to dust we shall return. It's inevitable unless he comes back sooner than when we're called, okay? And so we just need to plan for that. It's not a topic that is fun to talk about. And so tonight, I hope, Autumn, that you and your dad over here living south of town on Highway 33, right, or at Amarillo, that it opens the door, and I'm really glad we have multi-generation families here tonight. All right? Kaylin, I wish Kaylin was here tonight. She's probably off seeing that hairy-legged boy, isn't she? But, you know, I'm tickled to see multi-generational families because my hope is to get the conversation started. And that's what we found in ours is once we get the conversation started, it becomes a lot easier. Now, I'm going to tell you, my folks have done an amazing job, and I want to share with you a little bit about that because, man, how often do we keep digging, and we give up just before we get there? Now, I think ranching is a lot like faith. You know, we all come from different backgrounds, different size of ranches, different size of businesses, different kinds of cattle. It's not about where we came from, it's about where we're headed that matters most.
Let me just share with you a mission statement of where our family comes from. And this is our mission statement. It says we're continually striving to improve the efficiency of converting God's forage, because it's not ours, it's His that He allows us to manage, into safe, nutritious, and great tasting beef to better feed his people. That's what we believe our calling is. That's what we believe our mission is. And we want to keep our 5th generation, now 6th generation family business in the family. Now, I'm going to flip through a lot of slides here today, and I'm going to flip through them in a hurry. This is from 1895. My great-great-grandfather had horses, mules, and polled Angus bulls. Now, I don't know if there were horned Angus bulls, Andy, at that time, but he's talking about polled Angus bulls in 1895. Down in Calvert, Texas is where we originally were, and you can see the date over there, Calvert, Texas, 1809, where we can fill in the blank. So our family's been in the business for a long, long time. His son moved to Fort Worth, Texas, and managed one of the first commission companies at the Fort Worth stockyards. With money he made there, he moved to Throckmorton, Texas. And he bought land in Throckmorton, Texas. And I'm going to come back to this slide here in just a minute. His son was the first to live in Throckmorton. Now, Throckmorton's 120 miles southeast of Childress, if you wonder where Throckmorton is. It's about straight south of Vernon and north of Abilene is where we call home. R.A. Brown Sr., my grandfather, lived in that home when he first married. And he married this lady's daughter. So rancher married rancher's daughter. Sure, nobody else has ever done that in this room, but it tends to happen pretty regular, doesn't it? This lady was pretty interesting because she built a boarding home in Throckmorton, Texas, right next to the school for the ranch kids in 1916 so they could ride their horse to school, and then the dorm mother would stay in the boarding house with them all week, and then Friday after school they'd get on their horse and head back to the house. She transferred her ranch in the 1920s, 30s era, skipping 3 generations, tax-free. Now, we can't do that today because those tax holes, those loopholes have changed. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not an expert in the law. I'm going to encourage you to go to your accountant, to your mentors, to your attorney, to someone who you know that knows more about the law, because I know a little bit about cattle and horses and family, but I know we need to use the right tools, and there's different tools. Back in the 1920s and 30s, so all of the ranch that she brought to the family, her daughter and my grandfather never owned. They had a life estate. My dad, my parents never owned that land. They had a life estate, and now it's passed to us. Skipped 2 generations. He lived in that house, and I'll tell you, he came, that was in the cover of the Cattleman magazine, 1928. That's my grandfather, R.A. Brown Sr. It was also on the cover of the Hereford World, and it was Hereford Journal, and it was also on the cover of the menu of the Transcontinental Train, going from East Coast to West Coast. But there he is sorting the Hereford cattle in 1928 in Throckmorton County. And there's several generations later doing the same thing. Now, he first came as a teenager to Throckmorton, Texas. The winters were tough. It was in the middle of drought. We know what that's like, don't we? He was in the middle of a drought, and the grass was short, and feed was in short supply. And then a harsh winter followed. He was a teenager. Lived with the ranch foreman while his parents were still working the commission company at the Fort Worth stockyards. Cows, the winter got so tough that cows began to die. And he and the foreman would skin the cows and salt the hides and put them on a horse-drawn wagon. And when they got a load of hides, they would drive that wagon 65 miles to Abilene and trade it for a load of feed to come back and keep the rest of the herd alive. You know, and all of us have some stories in our heritage of coming through the tough times. That's just part of our heritage of who we are as agricultural people. We just do what has to be done. So he raised a family there in Throckmorton, Texas. He was one of the founding members of the American Quarter Horse Association. And he came through some tough times with that winter. He married my grandmother. In the 1950s, drought again. Now, my grandfather went to A&M. Andy, I don't know if you knew that. My grandfather went to A&M. Yeah, there's something good about me, wasn't it? Yeah, so my granddad went to A&M and was there about a year, got on the polo team. We got a picture in our office, and he's on the polo team. Was there about a year, and his father passed away, and he came home to run the ranch. And things got tough in the 50s with the drought. And that's his mother and sisters, and what he did there was the bank would not loan him money because they had divided that part of the ranch up, and he talked his sisters into deeding their part of the ranch to him so they had enough collateral to borrow the money as a group that they needed. And the bank said they would do that. And he talked his sisters into deeding that in. They deeded all their land to him. They made it through the drought. It rained. Lord willing, it's going to rain tonight and tomorrow. And he deeded all that land back to his sisters. Now, some of us know some families that once they got that land deeded to them might not do that. But you know, it's about being honest and truthful about what's right. It's about living the cowboy code. It's about doing what's right. They had this little boy. He was the one that Andy just mentioned, and you were so nice to give him a standing ovation, and I very greatly appreciate that. That's my dad, Rob Brown. About 1942 in Throckmorton, Texas, is the house where he lives today. He married my mother, Peggy Brown, another rancher's daughter, and they had kids, and they had a lot of courage. I like that definition of courage. And he had that, and he raised horses, and he raised cattle, and he raised kids. And he invested his life in doing that. I'm the youngest of 4 kids there with our grandmother. And we have grown up on the ranch, and we've all married, and we've gotten kids, and we've grown, and we've grown, and we've continued to grow. And those 2 right there are grandparents of lots of grandkids. 17 grandkids and 12 great-grandchildren now. That was at Easter. So here's the question. Is your family business riding into the sunset or at the break of dawn at the start of a new day? Sometimes we can't tell by a picture what time of day it really is. But that's my question for you. Is your family business riding into the sunset, or is it the break of day and starting a new era in what you're doing? How many of you have seen this picture before? Can I see a show of hands? All right. It was taken at my house by David Steckline, famous photographer. In fact, this is his most famous print of all time. It's called The Lesson. And you'll see it in a lot of different places. That's my son, Tucker. The rest are my nieces and nephews and my brother-in-law, another one, and I'm right over there. That was at our house. Here they are 10 years later, and it's time for a 20-year picture because it's about 20 years since that picture was taken. But here's what's been neat about our family is that they didn't just leave us on the fence. They wanted us to be more than just bypassers and watchers. They got us on boots on the ground to be a part of the business, to know what we were doing and where we were going as we raised multiple breeds of cattle. And I've raised 17 different breeds of cattle in my lifetime that we've had raising on our ranch. 3 primary breeds today as well as the quarter horses. And we've done that with absolutely wonderful people. This man is one of the great mentors I've ever known. He lacks an English course graduating from high school. But George Self had more wisdom than about any man I've ever known. And we all have families that we work with. people that are an integral part of our business. George's dad worked for my grandfather for 47 years. He had 2 uncles that worked 40 years apiece. George was born and raised on the ranch, rode his horse 10 miles to town every morning with his brother. After high school, he decided he wanted to be a quarter horse jockey. And he spent 6 months being a quarter horse jockey, and he came back to my granddad and said, "Mr. Brown, would you hire me back?" And he spent the next 56 years at our place. And I look forward to seeing George again. His brother came back after 20 years service in the military and worked for our family for 17 years. We've got a lot of family that's important. And as you talk about generational transfer, those are important people that we need to keep in mind too, about their future. Because we don't want them to be sitting out there going, uh-oh, they're changing and Junior's coming in and what's going to happen to me? Remember, we need to keep that part in mind as well. All of that family, all of the employees that we work with, it's important to communicate with them. We like to have meals from time to time together. Think that's important. Mom and Dad started our generational transfer about 30 years ago. Formed a limited family partnership 30 years ago. That was the legal tool to use. Not sure it's the perfect tool today, but your advisors will know best as laws continue to change. But they did that, and here's the thing. There are a lot of different tools out there to use. It's just like there are a lot of different trails to lead to the watering hole. We just need to remember, what's the main objective? I would say the main objective is to keep the ranch in the family and the family in the ranch. Now, we don't have to change. We don't have to use the technology that's available. We don't have to use computers. We don't have to use cell phones. We don't have to use estate planning. We can go back to covered wagons if we want to. But why not use the tools that we have available that are there for us? Love is a big part of what they've done. And what they did is they said, all right, we're going to divide this. What we're going to do is we're going to give away every year a certain amount of the ranch that is we're limited on how much we can do. But we're going to give up to the maximum limit to each of you 4 kids. And what we did is we agreed and we signed a deal every year that said we don't get any proceeds from the ranch. No dividend. No ownership. Mom and Dad are still president of the company. This is an estate planning tool that allows us to save some tax burden if something happens to Mom and Dad. And we did that for years. Now here's the thing. And remember, I'm not here to say any of you have to change anything you've done. Not at all. But you will have to compete with those who do. That's the reality. Are you going to help prepare the next generation? Or maybe it's skipping a generation in your family, and maybe it's your grandchildren have the most interest to come back to be a part of the family business and the heritage in what you do. And just don't expect Santa Claus to come along and make it all happen. Here's what my folks did, talking about keeping the family in the ranch. Here's what they did. I'm talking about keeping the people involved. Because how many times are there ranches where there are people at 50 and 60 years old and dad's still in charge and doing everything and they're just the grunt? So what dad and mom did for us, here's the thing. When we were freshmen in high school, they set us down and they said, all right, in 4 years you're going to graduate from high school, or at least you better. And in 4 years you can go do anything you want to do. You can go to the military, you can go find a job, you can go pro rodeo, you can do whatever you want to do. But whatever you do when you graduate comes out of your pocket. And you pay for it by yourself. We're going to give you 2 cows right now. We're going to give you 2 heifers. We'll cover the cost on production. You breed them, you manage them, you develop them, you market them, and that's your income. And we'll provide you work anytime you want to come. Anytime you want to work, there's work to be done. Isn't that right? We never run out of stuff to do. We never run out of things that need to be done. But they said, we want you to have what you have because you earned it, not because it was a gift. So coming back to the ranch, we learned at a young age, it's not a work right, not a birthright, it's a work right. And we learned the value of hard work. And we all paid our way through school. But here's one thing we did. We divided, all for the four of us have different interests, different passions, different things that make us tick. And so as each of us came back to the ranch, now here's the other thing they said. If you want to come back to the ranch, you can, in one of two ways. You can come back as an employee and work for the ranch, or you can come back with a business plan to expand the business, to grow it bigger, because right now it's a pie that's big enough to feed this family. And if you're going to bring another family into the picture, then you need to make a bigger pie. So you come back with a business plan, and you come back with a cash flow statement that we together can take to the banker. I'll help provide some collateral. We can partner on it together to grow the business. And that's what we did. We grew the business in different areas to expand the business in farming and wildlife, stocker cattle, cow-calf, feedlot, different operations that we developed on the ranch. We just started dividing responsibilities. I remember being home from the ranch, and we didn't invest in the ranch right away because the market was high. Troy Laphams and Cattle Facts, that group told us it wasn't very smart to invest when it's high, but wait until it's lower. And so I worked for the family business. I worked for the family for 16 years for $1,600 a month. That was my salary for 16 years. My dad was incentivizing me to do more than just work for the ranch. But I had all the work that I could do. My wife worked for $800 a month. But not long after I came home, about 3 years after I came home, my dad became president of the American Quarter Horse Association. He was gone for 300 days that year, traveling the globe representing that organization that my grandfather had helped start. And he gave me a lot of responsibility. A lot of responsibility. Now here's an interesting thing to note, because I wonder why my dad did that. Now, Kelly and I did finally invest in the business, expand the business, and we've grown it. But as I look back, and why is my dad the way he is? And I never had the opportunity to know my grandfather because he passed away before I was born. But my grandfather, R.A. Brown Sr., was a beloved man, a man of great character, and also a very traditional man that loved his red and white Hereford cattle. Lee Haygood. Yeah, absolutely. And he didn't want to do anything different. But my dad was the first of our family to graduate from college. And he had learned about crossbreeding and the advantages of crossbreeding that several people talked about today. And he wanted to come back and use these ideas, but his father squelched those ideas. Said, "You just keep working, boy." Well, in the drought of the 50s, we ended up with some country in Colorado to help keep the herd together, to keep the family genetics together. And after that, my dad graduated from college in, what year was it? 58, Dad? Graduated college in 58, came back to the ranch. My grandparents would go spend summers in Colorado. It's beautiful up there. And Dad would be in charge for 3 months. And then he was back to the low man on the totem pole. And they didn't agree on a lot for about 8 years. And in 1964, 65, I remember our family would go take family vacations at the ranch in Colorado. We'd stay 2 weeks, didn't have TV, and we'd hoe the shelter belts all that 2 weeks. I wasn't sure it was vacation, but that's what we did. It was cooler, I will admit. But that summer, my dad and my granddad did more brainstorming about the future of our business, of R.A. Brown Ranch. And my dad and my granddad agreed on more things than they'd ever agreed on in their lives. And they agreed to start crossbreeding. And they even agreed on the breed to start crossbreeding with. And it was really neat that that happened, because at the end of that 2-week period, my grandfather had a massive heart attack and passed away. My dad was 29. His sister, only sibling, didn't want to be in the ranching business. So my dad leveraged everything he had with the Federal Land Bank and borrowed the money to buy out his sister. paid it off not long ago. But I believe that my dad is inducted into the Saddle and Sirloin Club Hall of Fame because he received his father's blessing to go and be progressive, to go and use the things that he learned. And even though it might not be the same things that he did or were his passions, but to go and use the gifts of which he was blessed and to be progressive. And I'm confident that's part of the reason why my dad has had the success in the business that he has. So as you look at your family business, I encourage you, what are ways that we can divide it up so the kids don't just play tug of war fighting over it after it's all done? What are ways that we can put it together? Because these pioneers worked hard to make it happen. And here's one other thing, is that this lady right here was a very important part of that. And that's my mother, Peggy Brown. Nathan Allen, my cousin back here in the back of the room, kinfolk. That picture of the newspaper clipping is her in about 1946. Anybody recognize it? No, you can't really see it in that picture. That was her on her knees with her Hereford steer. 1946, she was 9 years old. She couldn't show in 4-H because that was just for boys. And so she showed in the open show. But that little girl with pigtails prayed for us every day. She was our Sunday school teacher growing up. And I'm going to back up here just a couple of slides because here's what these people did in the fall of 2012. They had, 4 of us kids had all come back to the ranch and grown the ranch, expanded the ranch into different enterprises. We worked for the ranch for periods of time, and we grew the business. We all worked together. But at the same time, my older siblings, who are 9 and 11 years older than I am, grew, in addition to the family business, they grew their own ranches. Okay? They leased land, bought cows, they bought some country. They grew some business outside of R.A. Brown Ranch that they could do independently, in addition to the family business in partnership with Mom and Dad. But in the fall of 2013, Dad said, all right, we're going to divide this up. Now keep in mind, when he was giving this away for 25, 30 years, he was giving it away a little bit at a time. It's kind of like that Johnny Cash song. Got it one piece at a time. That's just kind of the way we did the ranch. But he did that, but everything was undivided. So every acre was owned, an equal percentage, about 20-something% by each of us kids at that point in time. All undivided. So in the fall of 2013, Dad said, all right, we're going to divide up the ranch. So, all right, this vision pops into my head, Amy, that says, okay, we're going to get out the map, we're going to roll it out, and we're going to divide the map to see who gets what someday. And Mom and Dad said, no, we've lived our dream, and our dream now is to watch each of you pursue your passions. So we're going to divide up the ranch, and you're going to get that. And we're like, that's kind of cool, but y'all are in good health, and you're relatively young. What are you going to... So they kept the producing minerals on the ranch the producing mineral interests that we have on the ranch, divided with cousins and what have you through the generations. But that, along with their savings, is their retirement in which they live. And we're going to make, now Mom's sometimes worried she's going to end up cleaning toilets, but we're going to do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. So my dad says, we're going to divide this up. Each of you pursue your deal, and you're kind of like this part, the farming. I think you're going to get the farming. You kind of like the seed stock cattle, I think, and that's when my mom put her foot down. She said, Rob Brown, we're not going to do it that way. So we're giving this ranch to these kids, and we're going to let them decide who gets what. And that's what they did. They said, all right, y'all meet. If you need us, we're here. But y'all meet somewhere besides our house, and y'all figure out how to divide up this ranch. And that's what we did. And my mother bathed us with that prayer, and that she taught us 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 13, that these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. She instilled that in us forever. We met once a month. My brother lives 30 miles over here or so between here and Stinnett. So we had a pretty fair drive to Throckmorton, Texas, so we met once a month. And what we did is we met for a day, and we would say, all right, what are we going to tackle this time? And we started by saying, all right, let's divide it into equal blocks. Let's divide the ranch, and let's don't hopscotch it where everybody gets alternating pastures. Let's make it a block where we can have our place, have some independence. So what we did is we came up with the assignment that everybody was going to break up the ranch into, and we break up the ranch into 4 equal parts based on value, not acres. Because some had houses on it, some had more different things on it, some had more farming on it. So it was going to be based on value. 4 equal parts with the assumption that once we get it divided all up, Craig, once we get it all divided, that we could draw numbers out of a hat. And whichever one we ended up with, we'd be happy. That was the litmus test. And we divided it all up, and it went beautifully. It went beautifully. So we divided the land, but then we were like, what do we do with the cows? And what do we do with the horses? Dad said, we're going to divide up the horses too. We said, Dad, you love those horses. We can't do that. Dad kept 10 horses, and there's pride and joy that he keeps at his house. He gets to see every day, and they're foaling right now and natural breeding with the cool stallion. But the cows, now remember, this is 2013. Remember 2011, 12, and 13? We didn't have a lot of grass. Our country doesn't have any underground water, and we had 70% of the ranch without water. So we're totally dependent on runoff. So we had sold most of the commercial cows because we have a lot of commercial cows and seed stock cows. So we were down to primarily the seed stock cows. Now I'm going to tell you, my siblings are not real interested in all the paperwork required to do seed stock. And I'd managed the seed stock division since 1995. And so we were like, all right, we can divide up these cows 4 ways, but they're 3 different breeds, and how do you divide them up on value and all that? And my siblings weren't interested in the papers anyway, so we came and said, how about we just have a total dispersal, sell everything. We can divide cash easier than we can divide cows. And it allows, instead of letting 3/4 of the cows become commercial cows, it allows mom and dad's life work of building these genetics to live on through herds around the world, around the country. And that's what we did. We dispersed. We sold every cow in the place. We had a 3-day sale, sold 1,800 in. But we were very transparent. We had it on a video on our website. We announced it from the block that each of us might buy a few cows out of that. Because I still wanted to be in the seed stock business. I still wanted to have some of our family cows. And each of us bought a few cows. I bought 40 cows in that sale. And that's where we have built our program back from. We all ended up with some cows, and we grew back, and it has worked out beautifully. And I'm going to tell you, our family, and we're all pursuing our own thing. We're all independent. We neighbor and help each other. Our family has always gotten along good, but we get along better now than ever before. And I think it's because of the grace of God and the love of my mother and daddy. But we would meet together, and we started by just meeting with the siblings. And we left the in-laws, until about the 4th meeting. Because it's not that we don't love our spouses, but we all felt like it was important to be just us kids to have those discussions, those early discussions. Now, we can discuss it with our spouse when we get back home, but let's just keep it to the ones that were all raised under that one roof. That roof right there. That's the house where we were all raised, and that's the house where we all lived under the same rules, and we understand. But the 17 in the next generation, the 6th generation, weren't all raised in that roof. They weren't all raised with the same rules. And that's one of the things that Mom and Dad believed was best, to go ahead and pass on the ranch while they were enjoying good health. And it's worked very well. We laughed a lot. We cried a lot. That's my oldest sister, Betsy, and her family. Well, their son, the one there in the middle on the right, was one of the stars in the movie Farmland, if you happen to see that, talking about young people in agriculture. That's my sister, my brother Rob A. and his family live over here near Stinnett. That's my sister Marianne and her husband. Their 5 kids live there at Throckmorton. And then my crew here a few years ago. Like I say, those pictures are about 10 years old. And we have some storms on occasion, don't we all? But we got to get through those storms. We got to get through the battles, through the challenges that we have in life, because we're all going to have them. March the 6th, I was in Ashland, Kansas, helping my friend Mark Gardner, who lost 46,000 acres. That's just like you guys were going through it that night. He lost 551 head of cattle, 6,000 round bales of hay, and his home. I got to spend 3 weeks with my friend Mark in Ashland last spring, and that was a blessing. Because it's another family that's done a lot of the same things that we did a lot of the things that they did in their family business. There are others, but there are challenges that we face. Things that come that we don't expect. And if we get bucked off, what do? Yeah, we get back on. We endure droughts. We endure challenging times when the water's not there. But you know what? The rain will come. The rain will come, and He will provide. My wife's now a photographer, and she loves it. Friend us on Facebook. She loves to take pictures, and that was one of her first video pictures to go viral. It's one of our stallions there, and a fresh start is what we got. All right, here's the question. Tile floor, concrete. Anybody remember that game? If you step on a crack?
Break your back.
You played it too, okay. Now, when you play that game, what do you focus on? The cracks. I did a research project with a group of kindergartners. And half of the class I taught to focus on the open place, to focus on the target, focus on where they wanted to land.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you what, we divided the 2 teams up, that 2 halves of the class, and we raced one student at a time. And it was unbelievable how much further the kids that were focused on where they wanted to go, how much further they got, and how many fewer mistakes they made. So that's my challenge to you, Andrea, is to focus not on the cracks, because we all have flaws. Our siblings may think they're perfect, but they might have flaws too. And we might have flaws. That's who we are. We're broken people. But we need to have grace and love to accept that. And let's don't focus on the flaws. Let's focus on the target of where you want to be. Now, I'm going to tell you this. My parents did it very progressively in dividing up the estate, the ranch, while they were still living. I have no idea how difficult it must be to divide up a family business, to divide up an estate while mourning the loss of a loved one. I have no idea, because I'm so thankful both my parents are still enjoying good health. But I'm thankful that my dad was still in the saddle so that I could go and talk to him and ask him for advice and wisdom. I don't want to have to be doing it at times like this. And I don't think your kids do either. Let's enjoy the family time. Remember these times? Maybe that video camera's working in there, that screen's working like you were talking to me about earlier, as we all flash back to these memories. You know, every good puppy should have a boy. And thankfully, Kelly and I had 2 boys and quite a few puppies along the way. And I'm going to share with you a few things here real quick, because here's the thing. We looked into it, and all of a sudden, here we are. I'm almost 50 years old, and I'm older than my parents were when they started doing estate planning. We've been talking about what Mom and Dad did, and we're behind. It's time to start planning. So let me just tell you a little bit about my 2 boys. They know it's a work right, not a birthright. Both of them put their way through school. My oldest son through Lubbock Christian and TCU Ranch Management School. My youngest will graduate from Texas Tech next month. And they both got done quicker than I did and made better grades than their daddy. I'm sure proud of them. But they've worked on the ranch, and they knew it from the day they were about 12 and 9 that they were going to be passing on. They were going to be working. This was our youngest son on a kindergarten, first grade paper. The back of his homework. You can see the little smiley faces on the original on the back as he turned it over. I'll translate for you. It says, I'm happy because I live on a ranch and I get to work on the ranch. You remember those days yourself? And don't we want that for our kids and our grandkids? How can we best make that happen? How can we do it with them working with their cousins and learning that from a very young age? We think that's important for them to do. But those boys grew up working together. And here's the thing. As they had heifers, there's the two of them at the front of this heifer. This cow's pretty important to us, by the way. She produced her age 16 and a half and had over 400 offspring. She's a pretty special cow. She's part of the reason why Red Angus, Andy, has moved up on your list close to the... That's Abby Grace right there. That's Abby Grace. So here's what they did. Just like my parents did, instead of them owning their own show heifers, they each owned half interest in each other's. My sister and I did the same thing. My older two siblings did the same thing because we learned to work together. And if one of ours died or one of ours got sick, we both suffered. If one of us won, we both shared in the rewards and the risk. And we learned that early on. Watched these three boys from Throckmorton compete last year in just last week at the intercollegiate finals for ranch horse competition. And they're still doing it today. They're still doing well. And they did a lot of sports. Andy talked about our background in FFA. My wife and I, a lot in FFA. My kids weren't that interested. I remember when our oldest son came in as a sophomore in high school, and he said, my ag teacher said I needed to talk to y'all. So Kelly and I sat down, and he said, I'm just really not interested in doing the FFA thing. I don't want to run for office, Dad. They showed heifers, and they involved in horses, and they did a lot of different things. They became avid athletes and avid fans as they grew up, and they worked together. And if we had a steak, they got to share a big sirloin. One of them cut it in half, and the other one got to pick which half. That was one of the ways that we did it. Our boys worked hard at all they did. And I've got a lot of stories I'd love to tell, and I don't have enough time tonight, but how they overcame injuries, overcame challenges. They played in the band in their football pants there on the left during halftime and continued to play ball. My oldest son there, as a freshman in high school, broke his left leg right below the knee. They had to put a 19-inch rod down his shin bone to put it all back together. And he became the shadow of the coach. He learned to think like a coach. He learned to think the game in both football and basketball because it took him that long to heal. He also loved basketball. And he said, I want to become a basketball player. I remember as a sophomore in high school, he said, I want to play college basketball. Now notice this boy at the time was 5 foot 4 inches and 120 pounds. And we're like, okay, and I'm going to tell you, his mom and my wife, we hauled him to basketball camps all over the country, and he worked hard at it. There he is. That was in Indiana. Remember the movie Hoosiers? That was at the old Hoosiers gym. Well, he loved it, and he worked hard at it. And still today, he's the only player in the state of Texas to be All-State Player of the Year in both football and basketball. He was 5'8", 140 pounds when he graduated from high school. He wanted to play college basketball. So he went and tried out at a number of different schools. He got a scholarship to play at Lubbock Christian University. They put him on the JV squad. He was the youngest player by a year. He was the shortest by 2 inches, the lightest by 20 pounds, and the fairest complected of all the players. I remember Kelly and I making that drive to Lubbock, Texas, and going to watch that first game, and he rode the bench like a champ for the whole first half and got to play in the second half. And I'm going to tell you, two parents couldn't have been more proud than we were. We went to all the rest of the games, and he was the starting point guard for all the rest of the games. And not because he was the tallest or the fastest or the best athlete, because none of those was he. But he helped make everyone else around him better. And that's why he was the starting point guard. He graduated. He played 1 year. They moved up a division. And he said, you know, I've accomplished my goal, Dad. I think I'm going to get into leadership. And he became student body president at Lubbock Christian University. And then went on and spent some summers, that one in Ireland, working with sheep and red Angus cattle that were filled with our genes. And then he found this special young lady, a cotton farmer's daughter from Plainview. And last summer, they got married. And they joined us back at the ranch. And our son Tucker's back at the ranch with us, and his little brother, our youngest son, on the far right. Now let me tell you just a little bit about him, because he's a little bit different. He has always loved horses with a passion. Always. And he has always been one that was willing to work and get the job done. He too was an all-state quarterback. He overcame injuries, but he was there at the sale to work. And he, like his brother, won a state championship in six-man football. That one on Dallas Cowboy Stadium. He learned a lot. He also was a golfer. Won the gold medal. And that's the final putt to make him the gold medalist golfer his senior year in high school. He's picked up the clubs about 4 times since, because horses is his passion. And he loves really riding good horses. Here's the thing about keeping the family in the ranch, keeping the kids coming back, that I believe are important that my parents did. And I'm going to wrap this thing up. 4 things. They taught us how to work, earn, save, and invest. And I challenge you to write those things down, because I think that's important with the next generations of our family, to capture the essence of those 4 things. If we teach them to work, earn, save, and invest, I believe we will give them a bright future. I wondered if you would recognize that, Carol. We taught them how to work, and they didn't mind getting dirty, working on a water line in the middle of the night or pouring concrete all one summer. But they love each other, and like any brothers, they don't always get along. Our family's the same way. It's been that way. But he does a lot of things, and just like we branded back in the 1920s, we still brand today. And it's a joy for a father to watch his son want to come back and be a part of the business and to work side by side. And I'm going to tell you, I'm still thankful for the opportunity to work with my dad. Used to think he sat in this office and didn't do a whole heck of a lot. Boy, was I wrong. Now I'm the one sitting there, and our kids are the ones with boots on the ground, getting the job done at the start and the dawn of a new era. At the end of the rainbow that we continue to pursue. And we believe in having good times together. And we believe that's an important thing to do through the generations. Yeah, we got to work hard. Yeah, we've got to work long. But remember, we need to keep it fun too, so that we can press on toward the goal to win the prize. That's my great-grandfather, R.A. Brown Sr., second from the left on the polo team at Texas A&M. That polo field's still there on campus. Not much of that estate left, not covered by a building today. One of the things he did is he taught his fellow men, his cowboys, when he got back home, how to play polo. And on weekends, they'd drive a trail of horses to Abilene, 65 miles, to go play polo on the weekend. keeping it fun, keeping it enjoyable through the ages, through the generations, in all that we do. And I think that's important. But it's important to have the right tools. So I challenge you, whatever generation you are in your family, I challenge you to find the right tools to help keep your ranch in the family and your family in the ranch. And don't let what you want cause you to use bad judgment. I have to share just a little bit about this boy, our youngest son. He loves horses. That was AQHA High Point Horse of the Year 2 years ago. Coming home from Amarillo, he fell asleep. The police said it was the worst accident they'd ever seen somebody walk away from. But by the grace of God, our youngest son, Lanham, is alive and well. He fell asleep at the interstate there in Lubbock and 50th Street. And what tore off his door and the bed of his pickup and crunched his trailer like an aluminum can was the concrete pillar that holds up the overpass of 50th Street. It ripped off his door, ripped off the bed of the pickup. You can see the horse there in the back. That was the AQHA High Point Horse of the Year. I remember getting a call at 12:23 a.m. from a number I did not recognize. He said, "Dad, my horse is dead, but I'm okay." Boy, do we give thanks for the many blessings that we have. And we don't know when that time is going to come for us. But we need to be ready. There were 2 horses in that trailer. They were tied in the back of a 3-compartment, 24-foot aluminum trailer. They broke 1-inch leads, broke down both petition doors, threw 10 bales of hay as saddles and tack, and hit the front of the trailer when it hit that concrete pillar. AQHA has a rule where if you lose a horse in a tragedy that you can substitute. So he substituted his old gelding and went to the World Show and did okay. And that other little 2-year-old horse in the back, 2 years later, became the AQHA World Champion in versatility. And that's the stallion that my dad has turned out in his backyard with his horses. We're still having wrecks, but we're still winning championships too. But we got to overcome those things and realize there's certain things that we need to accept, the things that we cannot change. This is a prayer my brother prayed over us for years. Lord, give us the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. That's a picture out of the side window mirror. Are we looking in the mirror? Are we looking ahead? Are we looking behind us? Are we looking ahead? Is it sunset on our family business or the dawning of a new day to give the next generation the opportunity to become champions in the arena and in life as we pursue our calling to do what we feel called to do? I pray that each of you start that conversation and see where the Lord leads you to keep your family in the ranch and your ranch in the family. God bless you.